Okay, good. So now we are recording. Okay, so I'll repeat what I said. Yeah, so I didn't really make a presentation. That's not really my style. I just took some pictures from Wikipedia mostly. And those pictures that are not from Wikipedia, they are mentioned where they are from, what's the source. And I'm just going to tell you about the history of linear programming and simplex especially, and who were the prominent researchers and under what circumstances these developments happened. Largely in the 20th century. Okay. All right. So so the first question, of course, is so solving a system of linear inequalities goes back all the way to Fourier and Fourier-Motzkin. That's why the method is called Fourier-Motzkin elimination, which you might have seen in linear algebra. If you haven't, it doesn't matter. So Fourier was in around 1826. That's when he came up with his ideas. And Motzkin rediscovered those ideas around some 100 years later in 1930s. But when it comes to linear programming in particular, the first formulation, well, to the best of our knowledge, right? So everything I say is to the best of our knowledge. It's never easy to be completely accurate about historical stuff. So the first LP formulation was given by Leonid Kantorovich. Right, so maybe I've already written the name with the image here. So he gave the first LP formulation. This was during the World War II to plan costs and returns in order to reduce the army costs and increase the enemy losses. Right. So this was his work was somewhat neglected in the USSR back then. And around the same time, Dutch American mathematician and economist T.C. Koopmans, he also formulated linear programs, probably for similar reasons, because of the World War, right? And both of them were together awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics in 1975. Right? So what they did is they basically formulated real world problems as linear programs. Okay. So I don't know all of their contributions, but that was one of their main contributions, to formulate real world problems as linear programs. Right? That was at the time a sort of revolutionary idea. And apparently in 1941, F.L. Hitchcock, I couldn't find a good image of him, so I just did not put one. So in 1941, F.L. Hitchcock. So if you search for Hitchcock, you basically get Alfred Hitchcock's images, and you hardly get any images of this person. Was an American mathematician, physicist, and he had similar ideas and also gave a solution which was similar to the simplex algorithm. However, he passed away in 1957, and the Nobel Prize in Economics is not given posthumously. Right, so let me just say, had similar ideas, but he died in 1957. Right. So that's about the formulation of linear programs. So during the World War II, especially, that's when these things really picked up, because people started formulating the war-related problems, how to reduce the army costs, etc., as linear programs, and that's what really gave it an impetus. Okay, so the big question, of course, was how to solve linear programs, right? Okay, so the person largely credited for, well, the person responsible for the simplex method is George Danzig, right? So let me just say he developed the simplex method. Typically, I like to use the word discovered for mathematical stuff rather than invented, but I don't know. I think it's more of a discovery than an invention. But anyways, let's just say developed. It's less controversial. And Danzig, I would like to tell you a few things about Danzig. Has anyone seen Good Will Hunting here? The movie Good Will Hunting?
I have seen some portion of it, not completely, but the first part.
Okay, good. So those of you who haven't watched it, I suggest you watch Good Will Hunting sometime. You will probably enjoy it. So one of the scenes in the movie is actually inspired by George Danzig's life. So Danzig, I have a few things written about him here. So he's a US mathematician, a US American mathematician and scientist. And he gave general LP formulations for planning problems in the US Air Force. And he developed the Simplex method, which is very efficient in practice, but it's not known to be efficient in theory, right? So a few things about George Danzig. He was born to Jewish parents in Portland, Oregon, and his father was a mathematician and a linguist, and his mother was a linguist. And he, as a young person, he was already very interested in geometry, and his father, being a mathematician, was able to sort of nurture that interest. And he went on to do a bachelor's at the University of Maryland, College Park. Then he did a master's at Michigan, and then he went on to do a PhD at UC Berkeley, where he joined in 1939. Right, so the World War II had just begun, and so in 1939, in his first year of PhD, he went to a classroom. So his advisor for PhD was a guy called Jerzy Neyman. Right, so his PhD advisor was Jerzy Neyman, and in one of the lectures, which was given by Jerzy Neyman, he was late. So George Danzig arrived late to the lecture, and when he arrived there, Jerzy Neyman had already put up two problems on the blackboard, right? Now Danzig arrived late, so he did not know. He just wrote those down in his notebook, thinking that they were homework problems. Okay. So he goes back home and he solves those problems. He says in one of his interviews in later life that he thought that those problems were harder than usual homework problems. But nonetheless, he managed to solve the two problems, or he thought so, right? And he submitted his solutions to George Danzig at his office one day, and Danzig did not pay attention. He was busy in something else. He said, okay, put down your work here and I will mark it. 6 weeks later, Jerzy Neyman is super excited and is at George Danzig's home at I think 7 in the morning or something, banging his door because he wanted to tell him that he had solved two of the most important open problems in statistics. Because those problems he wrote down on the blackboard, they were not actually homework problems. They were just open problems in statistics. Right. So he solved those two problems thinking that they were homework problems. And that is an inspiration for the one of the introductory scenes in Good Will Hunting. Okay, so if you have seen the movie, you might be able to relate to that. Anyway, so George Danzig actually did his PhD in statistics because he solved these two problems. 1 year later, he was worried about his thesis topic. So he told Jerzy Neyman that, hey, I am worried about my PhD thesis topic. And Jerzy Neyman was like, you've already solved two open problems. Just put them in a binder and that will be your PhD thesis, right? So anyway, so that was Danzig's story. And just to let you know, he did his PhD from 1939 to 1947. That seems very long for somebody who solved two open problems in his first year. That's because he was away for the war from 41 to 46. So he went to serve in the US Army or something. as a civilian. And while he was there, I think around 19, so in 1943, I think, I don't have the date here. No, I think it was as late as 1946, actually. So in 1946, one of his colleagues at the army where he was working, he gave him a problem because he wanted to distract him from taking up another job, right? And the problem he gave him was like a challenge, and that was basically solving linear programs, right? So at the time, people didn't really know of any systematic method to solve linear programs. So his colleague gave this problem to him as a challenge, knowing that he was good at mathematics. And Danzig came up with a solution that is now known as the simplex method. So it was during his PhD, but it's actually not part of his PhD. He does say that the work he did in statistics actually helped him in coming up with a solution to the linear programming problem. Right? So somehow, whatever work he did in his first year of PhD was actually applicable in coming up with the simplex method. Okay, so that's how he developed the simplex method, right? And in 1948, there is an unpublished report called a theorem on linear inequalities. That's where his work was, his work appeared. But it's anyways an unpublished report. This is January 5th, 1948. And it was made available to the public in 1951. And post-war, it found lots of applications in the industry. Till date, simplex remains one of the most widely used algorithms in the industry. Not only for linear programming, but if you just consider all the different algorithms that the industry relies on, simplex, I think, continues to hold one of the most prominent positions, despite being not efficient in theory. Okay, so this is also a very good example of theory versus practice. Just because it's not good in theory doesn't mean that it cannot be good in practice. Okay, good. If anyone has any comments or anything you would like to say, if you know something, please feel free to turn on the mic and say that. I had to basically learn things. I knew some of these things, but yesterday I went through a bunch of different sources to gather this information and compile it. So that's Danzig's, one of the main people as far as linear programming is concerned, right? So at some point, Danzig met the very famous Jon von Neumann. Although it's spelled V, it's the pronunciation I think is von. Anyway, so he met Jon von Neumann at some point after developing the simplex method, and he explained his work to Jon von Neumann. And Neumann, who was at the time working on some game theoretic problem, immediately conjectured the theory of linear programming duality, which we are about to study next week, right? So they had a meeting, and that's when this guy conjectured LP duality theory. In fact, legend says that George Danzig explained his work to von Neumann, and von Neumann immediately goes to the blackboard and starts explaining a bunch of different things to Danzig about convex sets and etc. Danzig was a bit flabbergasted by von Neumann's knowledge and his his intuition about the whole topic. And immediately von Neumann said that I conjectured that there is a duality theory in linear programming because it's basically equivalent to the work I am doing in game theory. And that's how linear programming duality came into being. So von Neumann is largely credited to be the first person to see the duality theory in linear programming. Right? So von Neumann, there's lots of stories about him. Very interesting person. Also a child prodigy. I should mention that some of the people we are talking about, they seem like geniuses, but I do want to say that there is a good number of mathematicians who are not geniuses, who also have very important contributions. But I think there is a tendency in our society to just talk about the geniuses, right? So I'm not very much in favor of that, but at the same time, one cannot contribute their immense, one cannot belittle their immense contributions, right? So von Neumann was a very versatile mathematician. People have told about him that he was one of those few people who knew lots of different areas of mathematics. And he was not only a theoretician, but he was also someone who did a lot of applied stuff. He was able to apply the theory to actually solve real world problems. Anyway, so I won't go into too many details about von Neumann. All right, so that's about von Neumann. All right. So, or maybe I'll mention a few things about, yeah. So, George Danzig got the Jon von Neumann Theory Prize in 1974. It was awarded to George Danzig. He was the first recipient of this award. So it was basically the first time the award was given, and it was given to Danzig, right? And this award is given by Informs, which I think you might want to know about. So it's Informs is one of the largest and most important groups. It basically stands for so OR is for Operations Research, MS is for Management Sciences, Institute for Operations Research and Management Sciences. So optimization largely falls into operations research. I don't think I've seen that many operations research programs in India. Generally, it's done by mathematics departments or CS departments. But in North America, there's a lot of departments of operations research. Also, management sciences also tend to have an interest. I think some of you may have taken courses on optimization offered by DOMS in IIT Madras. Right? So they also tend to have an interest in optimization because it has lots of applications to the industry. Right? Since 1982, there is also a George Danzig Prize. So there's a George B. Danzig Prize that was announced by the Mathematical Programming Society. Okay. All right. So that's all about simplex and LP duality and stuff. The question still remains, can you solve linear programs in polynomial time? Right? Notice that we are discussing certificates. Just to give you an example, deciding whether a linear program is feasible or not, right? So if it is feasible, you just give a feasible solution. So the problem is in NP. If it is infeasible, then you give a certificate of infeasibility, which is guaranteed to exist by Farkas' lemma that I mentioned yesterday, right? So we discuss a certificate of feasibility, and the fact that it is always there is a deep result called Farkas' lemma, right? So the problem is also in co-NP. And as I told you at the beginning in the first module, P is a subset of NP intersection co-NP. In fact, when a problem is in both an NP and co-NP, people tend to think that it might also belong to polynomial time. So that was a very big open problem, whether linear programming, solving linear programs, does it belong to P or not? Right, so this was one of the most important open problems after simplex had been developed, right? Because simplex was good in practice, but not theoretically polynomial time provable. Right? So that brings us to Leonid Khachan, who was a Soviet and US American mathematician, and who developed the ellipsoid method. It is a completely impractical method if you are considering about applying it to real world problems. So in practice, it is impractical, right? But in theory, it is actually the first polynomial time algorithm known for solving linear programs. Right? This was done in 1979. In fact, the February of 1979, when he was still in the Soviet. However, in 1989, he moved to the US, right? So in 1982, he was awarded the Fulkerson Prize, which is one of the most important prizes in combinatorics and optimization, named, of course, after the famous Fulkerson of Ford Fulkerson, right? For his work in developing the ellipsoid method, right? So it's generally awarded for a specific body of work. Okay. So I honestly do not know anything about the ellipsoid method. I would like to learn at some point. So apparently what it does is it generates a sequence of ellipsoids, which are like ellipses, but in higher dimensions, whose volume is uniformly decreasing at each step and eventually hits your minimum or maximum of the optimization problem, right? So that's a very brief take on it. Hopefully in future offerings of the course, if I manage to learn it, I might even teach it, but right now I'm in no position to do that. So that was Leonid Khachan, right? So as I said, in practice, it was useless, right? The ellipsoid method is almost never used to actually solve industrial problems. However, what it did is it told people, especially theoreticians, mostly complexity theorists, that this is a polynomial time solvable problem. So although the one we have is actually not a practical algorithm, there might be some other polynomial time algorithm which is actually somewhat practical, right? And it also led to other developments in other topics of optimization, such as convex optimization and maybe nonlinear optimization, right? So it did have sort of ripple effects and helped in making progress in other fields related to linear optimization, right? But the question still was, is there a polytime algorithm that is reasonable? Okay, so this was an open problem. Reasonable in practice. And that brings us to Narendra Kermarkar, who gave the Kermarkers algorithm. So he developed what is widely known as Kermarkers algorithm. So apparently it falls into a large group of algorithms called interior point algorithms. So I think when we started talking about simplex, or when we were doing the geometric example, somebody mentioned rather than rather than going from one extreme point to another extreme point, which means basic feasible solution to another basic feasible solution, can we instead find a path in the interior to get to the optimal solution, right? So that is exactly what interior point methods do. So this is a type of interior point method, right? So rather than going on the boundary of the polyhedron, you are traveling inside in the interior region of the polyhedron to get to your optimal solution, which I assume will be a basic feasible solution anyways. Okay, so that's the type of interior point method. So I'll also tell you a few things about Kermarkers algorithm. It's also very interesting history. Right. So this is the, let me just say, this is the first reasonably efficient algorithm that solves LPs in polynomial time. Okay. All right. So apparently the first interior point method based on some source was given by II Dickin in 1967. The first one was by, who was a Soviet mathematician. But that was not a polynomial time method. This is according to some sources. According to some other sources, the first one was given by Jon von Neumann before 1960s, but I couldn't verify exactly which one is the right one. Okay, so not entirely sure about that. But anyways, the first one, which is actually polynomial time, was given by Kermarker. Okay, so Kermarker, when he found this algorithm, was working at IBM Research, which is where this photograph is taken from. However, that was in 1983. However, when he published the algorithm, that was published in Stock, which is one of the major conferences in theoretical CS, in 1984. And when he published it, he was already working at a different place. He was working for AT&T Bell Labs, also in the US, right? So in his publication, his affiliation shows as AT&T Bell Labs. But it is worth noting that he actually developed it and gave talks about it already when he was at IBM Research, right? So AT&T Bell Labs started using his algorithm and realized the sort of monetary potential in his algorithm, right? Because it was polynomial time. At the same time, it was efficient, somewhat efficient in practice. I don't think it is as efficient as Simplex in practice. I think Simplex is still the most widely used algorithm in industry. So AT&T Bell Labs was like, well, this actually seems useful, so let's patent it. So in 1985, they applied for a patent. Right, and this led to apparently a huge controversy. So already at the time there was a controversy going on about software patenting, because people were patenting things left, right, and center. And now there is a person who evidently has done something very mathematical, and mathematics is generally not being patented. So there was a huge controversy in the US and around the world whether mathematics can be patented at all, right? So mathematicians and operations research folks, generally speaking, were quite unhappy that about this development. Turns out it was also debated in the US Senate, and the patent was granted in the May of 1988. So they won the lawsuit, or whatever you call that. Right? So the patent was granted, and yeah, so it wasn't a very good development for mathematicians. It led to a lot of dissatisfaction. And it seems that it also led to Kermarker being somewhat isolated as a researcher, because his work was not publicly available. Anyways, I don't know too many details. Turns out that the patent expired in 2006, and now the work is in public domain. Right? So that's basically the first time we got a polynomial time algorithm that was also efficient in practice, or at least somewhat reasonable in practice, right? Since then, there have been other developments, but I haven't made a list of all of those. There seem to be at least one or two other interior point methods that are also reasonably efficient. But yeah, you can read about it, right? So that's all of the theory of linear programming and simplex that I wanted to tell you about, right? And next week, we are going to start the next module, LP Duality. Right? So this is going to be our module 4. So I personally think it's one of the most exciting topics. It's a very theoretically appealing phenomenon, and it also has applications to combinatorial optimization, and so that forms the main theme of this course, right? How to apply linear programming, in particular duality, to solve combinatorial optimization problems, right? And that was essentially first observed by Jon von Neumann. All right. So yeah, that's all I have to say. On your assignment 3, which will be focused on simplex, you might be seeing some example where you solve a linear program, and you will be able to see that all of the points are extreme points, right? So anyways, you're proving that on assignment 2. So simplex does move from one extreme point to another extreme point. And if you look at the problem in 2 dimensions, which we can visualize, and we can also do it on assignment, you will be able to see that those extreme points in your polygon are basically adjacent. So that's how simplex moves around, right? But interior point methods, they don't do that. They move through the interior of the polygon and eventually arrive at an optimal solution. All right, so that's it. Are there any questions, comments, discussions? Yeah, so today's lecture is officially over. So feel free to leave. I don't want to take it all the way to 8:50. It's a short lecture.